hope the people at the back could hear me. Let's watch something fun to begin this. Sleep talking from one of my favorites, The Big Bang Theory.
Good morning.
Good morning. I know today is Applejack's Day, but we're all out.
That's fine. I'll have anything.
Really?
Yeah, you know, what if?
What, Ev? I like this side of you.
You know what I like? Smooth jazz. Oh, I don't care. You know me, I just go with the flow. Beach, public pool, they both sound awesome. On second thought, beach. I'd like to befriend a seagull.
That is crazy.
Yeah. Will you email that to me?
Have you played this for him?
No, I'm worried he'll say I violated his privacy. Listen how happy he sounds.
I'm up for anything, as long as I'm with you. What are you listening to?
Nothing?
Oh, come on, I want to hear. We don't need GPS. Let's just see where the road takes us. I see why you turned it off. That guy sounds like an idiot.
Honey, that's you.
Don't be silly. My voice is deep and sonorous, like a Caucasian James Earl Jones. Luke, I am your father. See?
It is you. I recorded you in your sleep.
Oh, look, a hitchhiker. I bet he has some interesting stories. That's me?
It's you.
So you spied on me in my sleep?
Sheldon, I'm sorry. You've been doing this every night. I couldn't help but wonder if it meant something.
Well, it doesn't.
Are you sure? I mean, the prefrontal cortex regulates impulse control, so it's plausible that when we're asleep, aspects of our personality that we repress might come out.
Don't try to put science lipstick on your new age pig. And for the record, you make noises when you sleep, and I've never accused you of repressing your inner chainsaw.
If you want me to object at your wedding, just give me one of these.
All right. How many of you know somebody who talks in his sleep? Oh, okay, then to point that out. But, okay. How many of you know anybody who walks in his sleep or her sleep? Oh, you do? Wow. I was expecting a much lower number. Okay. Okay, I hope you're not referring to yourself. Popular psychology has a lot of misunderstanding of psychology, right? However, this topic is one of those where our popular understanding of consciousness is not too different from the scientific facts and evidence that we have. And simply because it is a very divided field. Divided because you have a school of thought, and several schools of thought, what we call the old schools of thought, like Freud and James. And these old theories from these schools of thought still stand today much as they are unsubstantiated. Then you have another school of thought, now what we call neuroscience, right, that tries to understand consciousness really from the angle of perception, sensation, and neurotransmitter activity. So really, this is an exciting field. If I could say, this is one of the frontiers of modern psychology, the study of consciousness. It's exciting because by the time you or some of you become research scientists or psychologists yourself, right? And I have seen people who actually change majors from year 2 in engineering to psychology, ask me to write a letter for that to the school. Well, in 10 years' time, this will be one of the frontiers where a lot of new information is being uncovered in research. So I would say that there are developed very much established fields like developmental psychology, child psychology, for instance, right? And you hardly hear of theories like Sigmund Freud's psychodynamic being rampant there. But here in consciousness, things like wish fulfillment theory, things like James' stream of consciousness, all these are what we call almost ancient, almost tracing back to the history of the development of psychology. Those are still in force today. That is the unique, I would say, thing about this particular chapter in HP 1000, as opposed to all the other chapters. That is consciousness. So, today we have 3 parts to the lecture, which really corresponds to 3 sections in the textbook, right? These are fairly straightforward. Now, we find that the modern understanding of consciousness has to do with that last line over there, the process by which the brain creates a mental model of our experience. Now, that's the textbook understanding of what consciousness is. But how do we understand it? Let me try to draw an analogy here. And we could actually use a layman understanding of this word. Now, how many of you have heard of this word called hallucination? Hallucination. Thank you. Most of you rose your hand. Now, in your own words, could you say what hallucination is? Anybody? Now is the time to engage me. I hear some murmurings there. Yes? Come on. Do you need to check the dictionary? Okay, if you have the dictionary or if you can Google it, spend the next few seconds and then read off the definition there. What is a hallucination? Let's try to understand consciousness from there. Somebody please read it out to the class. Yes? Thank you. Apparent perception of something that is not present. Thank you very much. You use the word perception. Is there another definition out there besides this which we could refer to just to make sure we kind of all understand the same thing? What is hallucination? In layman terms, we see things that aren't there. Hear things that aren't there, right? That's a hallucination. Now, you use the word perception. If you think about that, we learned the word perception some chapters behind, right? Some chapters ago, right? Perception was, as we understood from the textbook, an interpretation of human sensory input. Is that right? Somebody care to have a different understanding? You just had that midterm quiz, so I think everybody kind of understand what perception is. So if you think about it, hallucination is a type of perception, right? As you just said. But it's not a simple or sort of ordinary perception. What kind of perception is that? In your own words, what would you characterize that kind of perception that goes on in a hallucination? Sensory? Yes, but all perceptions is based on sensory input. But what about that perception that's different from other perceptions out there? What characterizes a hallucination, right, in terms of perception that's different from other perceptions? Like I could see the word exit there. Everybody could see that? You couldn't. Oh my, I'm hallucinating. Right? You call me hallucinating, right? So what kind of perception is this? Give me an adjective, come on. A descriptor. Can't hear you. Vague? Fake. Okay. Another word for fake? Not real, yes? I heard something there, quite interesting, but I can't make it up. Imaginary, right? Perhaps you want to use the word distorted, unreal, yeah? Something like that. So if we say that hallucination is a distorted, or what we call unreal, fake, or could I also add the word uncontrolled perception? You kind of can't control it. Then perception must be some kind of hallucination, but a very controlled one. The thing is though, when all of us agree on a hallucination, we call that reality. As you have just proven to the class, to me, right? I see the word exit there, but none of you see it, right? That's the reality to you. So we're actually hallucinating all the time, and that we experience such subjective, dynamic, continuous experiences really is the understanding of consciousness, modern day consciousness. So, in my own words, a hallucination is an uncontrolled perception, and a perception is an uncontrolled hallucination. Now, the very specific experience of being you, right, is controlled by a hallucination generated by the brain. This may seem like a very strange idea, right? Because yes, visual illusions can deceive my eyes, and all of us have seen those. But how could any one of us be deceived by what it means to be me? For us, most of us, the experience of being a person is so familiar, so unified, so continuous, that we take it for granted. But here I'm telling you, we shouldn't, and we don't have to. There are, in fact, many ways we experience being a self, and you could see on the screen here. We experience having a body and being a body. There are experiences we have of perceiving the world from a first-person perspective. There are experiences of intending to do things or of being the cause of things that happen or are done in the world. And there are experiences of being continuous and a distinctive person over time, built from or shaped by a rich set of memories and social interactions. These are all experiences we could consider as consciousness. Now, many experiments show, and psychiatrists and neurologists know very well, that all these different ways that we experience of being ourselves or a self can all come apart. And that coming apart we call hallucination, right? Right? As we have seen, right? We could read something about ourselves, but hear something else about ourselves from another person, and then feel that we are actually a third person of a certain different, persona, right? And then we may experience certain consequences of doing things or actions that once again reflect another side of us. And here we are, four parts of us may not be unified. That's exactly what psychiatrists treat, isn't it? Schizophrenia. And we'll come to that topic towards the end of this HP 1000. What this means is that the basic background experience of being a unified self is rather a fragile construction of the brain. Another experience which, just like all others, require an explanation. So let's return to the bodily self right there. How does the brain generate the experience of being a body and of having a body? Well, is it just the same principles apply? The brain makes its best guess, and we call that perception, isn't it? The best interpretation about what is and what is not part of its body. Now, there is a very beautiful neuroscience experiment to illustrate this. Unlike most neuroscience experiments, however, this one, you could do it at home. All you need is a couple of paint brushes and one of these. Now, let me click on this. This is called the rubber hand illusion. Right? In this illusion, a person's real hand here is hidden from his view, and that a fake rubber hand here is placed in front of him. Both hands are now stroked simultaneously with a brush, while the person stares at the fake hand, as you could see here. Now, for most people, after a while, this leads to a very uncanny sensation that the fake hand is in fact a part of the body. Right? You saw the startle response there, right? I don't have to play this again. You saw the startle response. We could think of all kinds of clever ways to measure startle response, skin conductance, kind of from a calm rate and sudden jump, right? Body temperature and so on and so forth. Right? But in this clip, it's very clear the guy in blue has assimilated a fake hand. It's almost his own, right? Now, what is consciousness now then? If he is conscious of his real hand, how is it that a fake hand is assimilated? That is a construction of the brain. So, this means that even experiences of what our body is a kind of best guess. Just like you do multiple choice questions, A to E. If you don't know the answer, you do a best guess, right? And this best guess is a kind of controlled hallucination by the human brain. Oops, beg your pardon. All right. So really, What is consciousness? It is all of those things. But you have to say that in your own words. What it means, the process by which the brain creates a mental model of our experience, right? The idea here is that this process is generated and regenerated and consistently goes on. And your reality is different from mine. Now, in modern day psychology, we have these different tools, fMRI, PET scans, EEG, to study consciousness. And usually we use one of these two tasks, the mental rotation task and the zoom in task. Right? In the mental rotation task, subjects will be shown pictures like that and asked if they are the same object. What he or she does usually is to take that object, let's say the one on the left, mentally rotate it and compare with an object on the right. And we know that a person, in fact, did this rotation in his own mind, right? Did this mental rotation, because when we vary, that means we enlarge or reduce the distance between the first object and the comparison one, right? The amount of time taken to solve the problem varies as well. Right? So that's the mental rotation task. Right? We know that a person is conscious because he could think. The zoom in task. Now, some of us have gone through tutorials where I ask you, think about the NTU logo, right? So if I now ask you to think about the NTU logo, you will have a sort of a picture in mind. But what if I ask you, how many teeth does the lion in the NTU logo have? Now, how about this? How many years, in fact, appears of the lion on the NTU logo? 1, 2, or none? You need to stop and think, right? Right? That's exactly the zoom-in task. Right? When we ask people to imagine something, a cat, NTU logo, anything, and when we give them more and more details, the smaller the details, right, the more they have to mentally zoom in and the longer they take to respond. Those are experiments done to study human consciousness. So, old theory number 1, Sigmund Freud, psychodynamic theory. Write down the word psychodynamic. Right? 3 main components there, 3 main ideas there. You could read for yourself. Conscious, unconscious, and pre-conscious. Conscious part is straightforward, the part of which we are aware. Unconscious, we are not aware. Right? The pre-conscious is the area which could be brought into consciousness if we pay attention to it, if we deliberately bring it from where it is to consciousness. Now, this is kind of similar, Sigmund Freud's idea, to the idea of long-term memory. If you think about it, we have a huge reservoir, the long-term memory, that has an unlimited storage, right? We learned that in the memory lecture. Now, what kind of memory is responsible for bringing items in a long-term memory into conscious awareness? Come on, you just did a midterm on that. We have long-term, what is the other one? It's your working memory, that's right. That is responsible. So if you think about it, Sigmund Freud's idea could be understood in that way somewhat. So would one therefore then say that, look, modern day understanding of human memory is actually a psychodynamic theory's evidence for a psychodynamic theory? Experts haven't agreed on that. And that you will see more and more as we go on in this lecture, that we really don't have firm answers to many of the questions raised in this topic. William James, considered one of the forefathers of consciousness research, in fact, one of the forefathers of psychology, American psychologist, understands consciousness as a stream, right? As a stream, river, right? Long river, right? Of which there are 2 levels. The area of focus, right, what is right in front, or you could call sort of that, understand that to be something like attention, and then peripheral consciousness, things that are on the side. All right? So if you're now looking at me and listening to what I say, that's your area of focus. Wayne, the lecturer, what he's talking about. He's talking about consciousness. Peripheral consciousness has to do with the environment, things around me. The tables, the chairs, the temperature of the room, other people in the room, and so on and so forth. So James understands consciousness to, in fact, comprise of just these 2 levels. And it applies to the human being himself or ourselves and our environment. Note that he uses words like sensations, perceptions, thoughts, feelings, and desires. And at that time, in psychology, we haven't really developed the school of thought called the cognitive school of thought, right? So why is James using these words? This is something to ponder about. Today, the modern cognitive perspective likens consciousness to a computer, right? The conscious is information, or is information, images that appear on the monitor, right? A computer monitor. So they're non-conscious. So note the word here is non, not un. Right? The non-conscious is essentially your processor that's working in the background, your CPU, if you like, right? And sometimes a non-conscious motive or intention or emotion is being brought into consciousness. Notice how similar this point is in modern cognitive perspective compared to Freud's perspective of pre-consciousness. And then we have cycles in everyday consciousness, right? The idea that consciousness fluctuates, it waxes and wanes in cycles that correspond to our biological rhythm and to patterns of stimulation in the environment. It is difficult to experimentally show or prove, right, whether this statement is right or wrong, because it's difficult to get a handle on what somebody is experiencing, right? What we do know is that consciousness is a very bodily phenomenon, right, as you saw in the rubber hand illusion. Our sense of self fluctuates with our bodily cycles too. So sleep, wake, dreaming, daydreaming, all these are different states of consciousness, right? So we have different states. Each of these states follow cycles. They are related to biological rhythms, right? Research has shown that 30% of our awake time of an adult is spent in daydreaming. So I don't blame you if you're daydreaming right now in the lecture, right? Attention, when a person daydreams, right, goes inward, right? And if you recall, there's a school of thought that deals with introspection. Recall that? Okay, attention going inward. And an awful lot of time is spent when one is awake. So the 70% is awake, 30% daydreaming. Why do we daydream? We could actually experimentally put people in a scanner and ask them to daydream, right? And it shows that from these experiments that there are brain regions active, networks consistently being activated is what we call this default mode network. Let me say that again. There is this thing that was found, the default mode network, right? That is an area of the brain that has been consistently found to be activated when a person daydreams. So an experiment could be said, a person is just asked to daydream, and then after that asked to report, what do you think about? What do you experience? And consistently, of course, this person is hooked up to the EEG and all the other equipment. So we could find a specific area that is consistently activated called the default mode network. So it's almost like saying, look, daydreaming is the default mode, right? Human beings, when we have nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, no anxieties and worries, we default to daydreaming. That's the default mode of human beings, right? Does that surprise you? If it does, then you haven't been daydreaming, right? Your brain and mind defaults to ruminating on its own memories and desires what's in there and whatever else is in there in the soup, unless we are actively engaged in something. Now, daydreaming can sometimes be helpful in terms of planning, problem solving, decision making. We may even obtain creative insight. However, we know that too much daydreaming interferes with memory of recently learned material. So those were the basics of what consciousness is. And if you are asked in the exam what is consciousness, you should be able to say some of those in your own words, be able to at least point out one or two theories and say what these one or two theories say or prescribed or described as human consciousness. Now we'll go straight into sleep and dreaming for lack of time. Right. We have the circadian rhythm. These are physiological patterns that repeat approximately every 24 hours. Another word for this is called the sleep-wake cycle. Right. We also here have the what we call the REM sleep and the non-REM sleep or NREM sleep. Right. The REM sleep really is a time where a human regenerates. Right. It is the time when we have dreams. Right. It's the time where we really find restful sleep, if you like. Whereas the non-REM sleep really follows a series of stages, and you will see in the next slide the stages. In REM sleep, it is reported that we experience vivid cognitions, fanciful and bizarre scenes, often aggressive, lasting several minutes. However, REM sleep isn't one whole stretch of time or one whole continuous duration of time. It is interspersed with non-REM. So much so that we have the following. Right? So you could see there REM sleep in orange. And REM sleep duration gets longer as a person sleeps, right? So this is the first REM, second, third, fourth. You could see that getting longer. A person is awake, and then these are the different stages of sleep. Stage 4 is what we call the deep sleep or in a deeper state. And usually a person in a, say, 8-hour cycle would have on average, two deep sleep stages experienced. Right? So you could see that a person usually comes from awake to kind of stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and then back up to 3, 2, skip number 1, and then goes to REM sleep. Not really awake, but sort of not really in stage 1, 2, or what you call light sleep. So it's somewhat in between. So really, our theorists would ask, and I would ask you to ask yourself, would you consider this conscious, unconscious, pre-conscious, non-conscious, or what? That's right. Awake, obviously conscious, right? Stage 4, stage 3, perhaps even stage 2 and 1, obviously unconscious or non-conscious. But how about REM? Today, psychologists don't have an answer yet. Right. Okay. What happens when a person is deprived of REM sleep? Something to note, right? There is this thing called a Rem Rebound Effect. So rapid eye movement, that's REM. Rebound, R-E-B-O-U-N-D, effect, right? This usually happens on a subsequent night. So if you do not get enough sleep, for instance, say last night, because you want to study for the quiz this morning, and you only got, let's say, 4 hours of sleep. So you slept from here to here, right? Let's say. So you kind of, was awakened by the alarm clock around here, where you're at kind of stage 2. So what happens is you don't have the benefit of these other longer durations of REM sleep, which is supposed to be restorative and restful. So what happens is usually we experience in a subsequent night, so watch out tonight, right? Whether you have this longer REM periods where you have longer durations of dream. If they are nice dreams, you would enjoy, right? But if they are not nice dreams, then I'm not sure what you would do, right? That is found by scientific evidence. Yeah. All right, stages of sleep. We study stages of sleep really but with biological correlations, and a person usually is hooked up to EEG, right, to study that, the electro and sonograph. Right, so we could see that a person who is awake would exhibit brain waves like that, irregular and fast. A person who is drowsy but not asleep yet, brain waves, what we call alpha waves, right? They are anywhere between 8 hertz to 12 hertz. Stage 1, 3 to 7 hertz. Stage 2, we see that a person has kind of 2 distinct patterns of brain waves, what we call the sleep spindle brain waves and the K-complex brain waves, right? Both of which kind of fluctuate between 12 to 14 hertz, right? Hertz meaning waves per second, right? I hope you know that. And then when the person reaches stage 3 and 4, delta waves. Now, what is interesting is really the REM sleep. If I could ask you to take a closer look at the REM sleep brainwave here. If you notice, first of all, these brainwaves are kind of different from stage 2, 3, and 4 in that they are shorter. So the magnitude, right, or intensity is less, right? Right? You understand how to read a chart like that, right? Okay. However, if you look at the frequency, what do you call it? Yeah, the number of waves per second, you kind of see that these are kind of similar to 1, isn't it? Somewhat, some parts of these, like here, similar to drowsy. So that is another evidence to psychologists that suggests that REM sleep is really a non-typical, it's not really sleep, it's not really unconscious. The person is not really like gone, but a person is not really awake either. Right? It's really somewhere between stage 1 and stage and awake. And another remarkable thing about waves of REM sleep is that they're fairly unpredictable in terms of pattern. If you could see, if you just look at that, compare that with drowsiness, you more or less could see patterns, stage 1. But look at REM sleep, we have sort of close together, far apart, close together, far apart, but they don't happen at regular intervals. Yeah, that is the part of sleep where our brain is most activated. We dream a lot there, what we call vivid cognitions, and we get restored, our body gets restored, mostly in REM. So why do we sleep? 3 reasons found. To conserve energy, or what we call a conservation or conservative purpose. We have a restorative purpose of the body, right? It's during sleep, especially in REM sleep, that our neurotransmitters regenerate, right? And our neurons become more sensitive. And finally, it's also to flush out useless information, or what we call a consolidative reason, right? So in the day, we have many sensations, perception experiences. We want to weed them out, right? And sort of keep what is important, what is meaningful. So here's where long-term memory comes in, right? Remember, semantic processing, right? Okay, weed out the rest, and the REM sleep kind of helps us take care of that without us kind of very consciously paying attention to doing that. So if you want to do well in the exam, actually, you should get a lot of REM sleep. You think about it, right? All the unnecessary information, all the distractions will be aside. Even though you played, let's say, games, go on your Instagram, whatever, right? Those will be aside. Those won't distract you. You focus. And there are ways to help a person become more focused and get into kind of a REM-like state. And that's really the topic of the 3rd section. Okay, before that. So this is the need for sleep. The point here is that as a person grows from infancy to adulthood to old adulthood to death, the need for sleep reduces, especially in the early stages of life, quite drastically, right? You could see, right, the purple and the yellow collectively adds up to the amount of sleep one gets, right? And we could actually experimentally do this. Just ask people of different age group, put them in a room, give them the sufficient conditions that are conducive to sleep, have them not aware of the time, and we just ask them to go to sleep. And when they sleep, right, we have no clock or no mechanism to wake them up, just let their body wake themselves up, and we measure the amount of time, right, that has lapsed. And we usually find that children or infants in this region, right, have the most sleep. I think you should know that, and that drastically drops by the time one reaches about 14, right, when one enters adolescence, and that drops further when one enters mid-adulthood, right? So for adolescents, for people here, I guess you're about 19, 20, 21, you are kind of around here. So you should try to get about 8 hours of sleep. If you don't get that, you may be sleep deprived, and there are deleterious consequences of that, right? Over the lifespan, the need for REM sleep decreases considerably, while the need for non-REM sleep diminishes, but less sharply. This is the other point here, right? So the yellow is greatly reduced over time, right? Whereas the purple reduces, but less sharply over time, especially around this region. You can see the difference. Right. Okay. If you are not getting the amount of sleep that you require, we call that a sleep debt. Right? Who do you owe this debt to? I don't know, but it's called a sleep debt. Right? You owe it to yourself, I guess. Right? And Demont, right, and colleagues even go as far as to say that a sleep debt, when consistently experienced, makes you stupid. Yes, it's found that. It is a serious textbook. It is not for fun. Right? You could easily find his article. Right? There are individual differences, obviously. Right? People adults require anywhere between 6 and 9. But if you look at the curve there that I showed you just now, you kind of see that for this age group that perhaps you come from, that you belong to, is about 8, really, for optimal functioning. Let me read you some research findings. Let me see. Sleep deprivation is associated not only with weight gain, but also with a shortened lifespan. National Institute of Medicine. In addition, the sleep debt is sometimes paid with a tragedy, as in the 2010 crash of an airliner in India, where all 158 people on board were killed when the pilot, who had fallen asleep at the controls for almost 2 hours, was too groggy to make sound judgments when he awoke just before landing. Overshot the runway, and the plane exploded into a ball of fire. Yeah. Of special interest to students perhaps would be that sleep deprivation has effects on cognitive functioning, motor functioning, right? And according to William Demont, it makes you stupid. So you would want to have enough sleep and good sleep before an exam. Just how stupid was stupid, right? They in fact went on to show this. So they deprived one group of volunteers of sleep and gave another group enough alcohol to make them legally drunk, right? After 24 hours of sleep loss, like staying up all night studying for a test, like you do, the sleepy volunteers on this group performed just like the intoxicated group on tests of thinking and coordination. So sleep deprivation is very common, right, among university students, medicine students in medical internships and residencies. Your textbook would have this, I will skip this, right, that assesses how much sleep you need. If you answer yes to any of these questions, it's on page 338, right? Chances are you are shortchanging yourself on sleep and you may be paying the price in your grades. If I've scared you, go read up more, it's in your textbook. Right, next we'll go on to why we dream. That's one of the crucial parts of this lecture, right? There is folklore, there is ancient Israelite mythology, there's the Native American, African cultures, right, that I try to explain why, and you could read, right? But our modern scientific approach, I just like to kind of focus you on these 3 things here, that dreams are either a meaningful event, and Sigmund Freud says that, or dreams are random brain cortical activity found by neuroscientists, or dreams are sources of creative insight and imagination, right? The experts do not agree, so we do not have a definitive answer on why we dream. But here are 3 major reasons. So Sigmund Freud says that a dream serves 2 functions: to guard sleep, right, and to serve as sources of wish fulfillment. If you think about it, Sigmund Freud actually has this idea that we have repressed anxieties, repressed sexual fantasies and sexual desires, and repressed anger. Yes, that's a lot of what comes from his theory, not mine, right? And so these repressed energies, if you like, right, finds fulfillment in dreams. They actualize themselves from latent, that means unseen, unmeasurable, to manifest. That means you could actually consciously experience it while in dreams. Right? That's what, in fact, Sigmund Freud says. And these experiences, according to Sigmund Freud, help you sleep better. It guards your sleep. That's his theory. Right. Move on. There's another theory here, and you should know this word well, for exam purposes, activation synthesis theory. This activation synthesis theory says that dreams begin with random electrical activation coming from the brain stem. Right? That dreams are the brain's attempt to make sense of this random activity. So the idea is this, that the brain is an organ that cannot sleep or cannot rest. So there must be constant stimulation. When a person goes from being awake to not awake, the brain has to keep itself busy. So it does this, what we call random activation. Right? And how this random activations is being picked up by another part of the brain, right? And so the random activations comes from the brain stem, and then the front corticals, here the cerebral cortex, right, synthesizes the signals, or what we call make sense of the signal. If you like, you could say that is kind of like perception, interpreting signals that are results of random electrical activations in the brain caused by the brain stem, and that makes a meaningful narrative out of that. So that is why we dream. We experience a story, a narrative, almost like a scene being acted out, like a script, a drama, if you like. That's the other reason for dreams, according to neuroscientists. Finally, dreams are sources or as sources of creative insight. That we say, look, we could actually use dreams creatively, right, to help ourselves. How do you do that? 3 steps here. First, find a problem that you are really motivated about. It could be anything. It could be world hunger, right? It could be your grades. It could be understanding psychology. Yeah, if you struggle or if you really want to do well, right? Saturate yourself in the problem. Number 2, let the ideas incubate by shifting attention to something meaningless, right? Or restful. And this is where dreams come in. Go to sleep. Rest. Close your eyes. Practice meditation, hypnosis, what have you. And then when you come back to consciousness, allow time for just insight to occur, and voila, spontaneous occurrence, insight comes to you. That is another school of thought regarding why we dream. We dream in order to obtain creative insight. All right, for the lack of time, I will just very quickly go through this. There are several sleep disorders in your textbook. I have 4 of them in the lecture slides. They are quite fairly easily understood. Right, I've also put in YouTube videos for you to kind of have a better idea of this disorder called narcolepsy, which often happens with cataplexy. Right, essentially the idea that in cataplexy, a person suddenly goes limp, suddenly, like in a standing position, suddenly just kind of falls, muscle loosens, tension, and goes into sleep. Cataplexy. Right? So the losing of muscle control that happens suddenly is cataplexy, and then when a person suddenly goes into Rem sleep after losing control of his muscles, there's narcolepsy. Often they come together, right? And then there is this thing called night terror, often experienced by children, where they are found terrified, screaming, right? But in fact, they are not awake. They are in deep sleep. And they are not dreaming either. They're not in Rem sleep. We say dreams are associated in that stage called Rem. So that's what we call a night terror. All right, we're going to move very quickly into this last section. If you need to leave early, you can. Right, there are 3 things here that help us go into an altered state or a different state of consciousness. Hypnosis. Sometimes we call that, clinical hypnosis. Right, it's the idea that we enter an induced state of awareness, altered awareness, right, characterized by heightened suggestibility and deep relaxation. Right? A person who is hypnotized or under hypnosis or in a hypnotic state, right, could be suggested upon. Say, stop smoking. Say he wants to enhance his performance in a certain sport. A therapist, a trained person, who actually suggests to him, and is really very subjective how much, how little, or whether or not a person is suggestible, right? So hypnotizability really is, right? It's really about suggestibility. So it's almost like the same thing, right? I have 2 YouTube videos there. I won't show you for time. You could look at them, to understand what hypnosis does. By the way, hypnosis is not this. I purposely put this image there, right? Just to remind us, right? Just to kind of tell us, modern day understanding of hypnosis isn't about dangling something in front of your eyes or mystery rays or looking up at the ceiling and some concentric circles and drooping down. All these are fanciful, you could say, acts, if you like, or induction acts that may help a person enter a hypnotic state, but that isn't hypnosis. Hypnosis, central to the idea, is really this altered awareness based on deep relaxation and heightened suggestibility or hypnotizability. So experts disagree at this moment, right, about whether hypnosis involves any one of the following. Right? Is hypnosis a distinct state of consciousness, or is it unconsciousness, or in fact it is just one part of consciousness? Right? Does a person really have this thing called the degree that he or she is hypnotizable or hypnotizability? Or in fact, the person is just motivated, want to please the hypnotist or therapist, or the person just simply, wants to kind of pretend play, make pretense, right? Part C, right? Social processes such as role play, right? One thing to note, though, is this idea of a hidden observer. I should read you the research associated with that. Normally, a dissociation between consciousness and hidden observer behind consciousness occurs in hypnosis. So during hypnosis, attention is shifted to this thing, what we call the hidden observer, instead of normal consciousness. Right? It's almost like saying that in hypnosis, one is in a totally different state from his usual state. Right? If you have heard of this personality disorder called a dissociative personality disorder, right, you know that this person isn't him, isn't this person when he's right at some other time. So that's really the idea of a hidden observer, right? And experts disagree regarding whether hypnosis involves a person in a dissociated state, right? That means behaving as if it's not him, it's some other person. And then finally, experts also disagree whether people who are hypnotized whether they are hypnotized because they want to be hypnotized. So that's number 5. If they want to, it is like a placebo effect. It's top-down processing. I just want to get into a state, so even if this person is not a qualified hypnotist, all it takes is just him or her to say something, and as long as I will just enter the state. That's number 5. So experts disagree whether this particular component exists. Right, 3 practical uses. Let me just point you to the last one here. Right, it's about pain management. So people go for dental surgery, sometimes childbirth, and there is a method of childbirth called the Lamaze method, L-A-M-A-Z-E, Lamaze method, that really focuses on the use of breathing and other techniques to help a person, right, address pain without what we call oral or injective anesthesia. Right, so hypnosis is actually used to control pain in surgery. Right? The person can go under no GA, no general anesthesia, no LA, no local anesthesia, while under hypnosis. All right, meditation. Often this is understood to be religious in nature, but it doesn't have to be. If you Google Harvard Medical School Mind Body Medicine Institute or Herbert Benson Institute, you will find that there is a lot of scientific work done, non-religious, though they started their work researching or what you call that, observing the monks, the Buddhist monks, right, connecting them to EEG and fMRI and so on. But they found that meditation, right, which involves focusing on some repetitive behavior, such as breathing in and breathing out, that's repetitive, right, and assuming certain bodily positions. It doesn't have to be this one, the lotus, it doesn't have to be, right, actually helps a person enter not just a relaxed state, but a different, or what we call an altered state of consciousness. Finally, psychoactive drugs. There are 4 classes of these in your slides. Right? I won't go through all of them because you have them nicely factually presented to you. Right? Just to note that these drugs also help or make a person enter into an altered state of consciousness with, however, consequences. Right? So unlike the other two, hypnosis, where at most you may be just, what do you call that, made to do some dance or do something embarrassing, squeak like a chicken or something. Psychoactive drugs do involve consequences like addiction, withdrawal effects, problems in problem solving, mental functioning, motor coordination, and so on and so forth. So I do not recommend you do these or take these. Right? Hallucinogens are also called psychedelics. That's the blank in your slides, right? There are 4 examples of these. Opiates, right? Highly addictive, of which morphine is often a top used, right, to control pain, often in palliative care for cancer patients. Depressants slow you down, right, such as alcohol, whereas stimulants hype you up, right, speed up your processing, right? And that's it, really, a very compact lecture on consciousness. I hope by now you have some idea of what consciousness is, but also the idea that, look, experts in this field have yet to agree. There is a lot of room for further research to clarify whether, say, for instance, hypnosis is this or that, whether consciousness is, how subjective is consciousness, right? There are many questions left unanswered. Unlike the other topics in HP 1000, you will find a lot of facts presented to you in the textbook, in the lectures. Here, you'll find that there are a lot of questions, rather, that's presented to you. So what we have covered so far are the established facts and some of the questions. You would probably have questions in your mind which you can raise in tutorial. So this is just an example of exam question. The answer is stage 4, right? In a night terror attack,